want to discuss one of the biggest potential breakout players this year, and that is Marquise, aka Hollywood Brown. And as a fantasy owner, you're always trying to find those guys in the middle rounds that are going to be taking a significant jump in production to win your league. Last year, some of those guys were Derrick Henry and Chris Godwin, both being drafted in the fourth, I think, or fifth round, and finished the year as at the top of their position and were essentially league winners if you drafted well in the early rounds. Those are guys that are just going to win you your league. And as fantasy owners, you search for those hidden gems in the middle rounds. I've already covered a video on Calvin Ridley being this year's Chris Godwin, and I have talked about Marvin Jones being very good in the late rounds. I've talked about Brandon Ayuk being a great late round sleeper. But I wanted to touch on another wide receiver that has a extremely high breakout potential, because the receiver position is one where they are able to break out far more frequently than the running back position, because the running back position is a lot more on opportunity, and it's very hard to project injuries, which usually leads to a better running back season. Obviously, running back rookies are always a great pick to take a flyer on because you never know what you're going to get with them. But I think it's far easier to project a breakout wide receiver. And that's why today I'm going to be getting into Marquise Hollywood Brown and why I think he has sneaky wide receiver 1 potential for the upcoming season. So, in one of my previous videos, I statted out Lamar Jackson for the upcoming season, and I think the Ravens are going to be passing the ball a lot more this year. I don't think they want Lamar to run for 1,200 yards again because they don't need him to. They have such a good roster. They have much better defense even than their good defense last year. But I think they want him to work on his passing to prepare for the playoffs and develop as a passing QB instead of a running QB. So I projected Lamar to go up from around 3,100 yards passing to 3,800 yards passing. And I projected 3 less passing touchdowns down to 33 because last year was too historic of a pace, too efficient, that I just could not see him throwing for 36 touchdowns with such a lackluster wide receiver core. And then going through the stat projections of Lamar Jackson and where his 3,800 yards are going to go, I had 400 of those receiving yards going to the running backs and 1,500 going to the tight ends, which leaves around 2,000 yards for the wide receivers. And this is a pretty, lackluster wide receiver core for the Baltimore Ravens. We have Hollywood Brown last year, who played well in stretches. Willie Snead, who's a career very mediocre receiver. Miles Boykin, not much. And then Devin Duvernay and James Prochet, who are rookie wide receivers, who were not high draft picks, but both have potential to become contributors down the season and in the future. Hollywood Brown is really the only player here who has had any significant draft capital, has had any significant investment by the team. And I think they are hoping that he will take a Tyreek Hill-like jump. So let's get into his stats from last year and how he played. So last year, Hollywood set 71 targets, finished around the wide receiver 50, and he played around 14 games, banged up, was dealing with an ankle injury. And when you turn on the film, he was a playmaker. You look at the games like the first game against Miami, a game later in the season against the LA Rams. He can score from anywhere. He is a threat. He is super fast. And I think he has the talent to take a significant jump this year. He's put on over 20 pounds of muscle to get his playing weight up to 180, which I think bodes well for him staying healthy this year. But the big thing with Hollywood Brown is he needs to see more targets to be successful. Because first, he's going to give you those big weeks. He's going to put up a 30-point game once or twice because he is a big play guy. But if you want even to have enough consistency to start him, he can't be seeing 71 targets. I mean, that's essentially 4 targets a game. For Hollywood Brown, I think, to see a top wide receiver season, I would say a guaranteed top 15 season, he would need to see 120 targets this season. I think if he saw 120 targets this year, he would put up around 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Last year, he put up some good efficiency ratings. 12.7 yards per reception, which is quite low for a guy who I think is mainly considered as a burner. And he put up a 65% catch ratio, which is good for a rookie wide receiver with a, I guess, often called inaccurate Lamar Jackson. 65% is pretty good. So if you take those stats, those efficiency ratings, and you put them to 120 targets, he would project for around 78 catches for 990 yards and 10 touchdowns. And I think it is very realistic we see 50 more targets to Hollywood this year. He should be the wide receiver one. He's built a rapport with Lamar Jackson. And there is no one else to throw the ball to. I mean, this is really not talent. It's just opportunity. I'm projecting the opportunity to increase for Hollywood. And will he be a wide receiver one like Tyreek Hill? He will not be. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying his stats for the year should be much better with an increased target share. And it is possible that he puts up a good season, but he's so hard to start because he either puts up a 25-point week or disappears for 3 yards. And that would be tough because as a fantasy owner, we want to have consistent production out of our players. You don't want to have to play the start-sit game and mess up your lineup every week. It's not a game that is very fun. But I think with the target share being around 120, Hollywood be consistent enough to be a really strong flex play every single week. Currently being drafted in around the 5th round, I think it's not necessarily his floor because, as he showed last year, he can have a very lackluster stretch of games at times. And that's not something you want to play, especially in a flex. You don't want to have that 1 or 2 point week. You don't want that anywhere in your roster. But I think if he sees a higher target share, even over 100, I think Hollywood Brown is a very viable flex play for a 5th round pick. If you're able to go running back in the first 2 rounds and you're getting him as your wide receiver 3, I am okay with that. As a wide receiver 2, I'm not as comfortable because of the inconsistencies, and we haven't seen him play well for more than a game at a time. I mean, projecting what I projected out earlier for 78, 990, and 10 touchdowns, those are wide receiver 13 numbers from last year in half-point PPR. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 32 in PPR. I think that is a pretty good value, but I would say he does have bust potential because of the injury, and we don't know what he's going to do. It's a guy who has a large array of outcomes, and I don't like him as much as I like Calvin Ridley because I think Ridley, we've seen him more consistently play. We know what he have in Calvin Ridley. He's a wide receiver 2 in a higher passing volume offense, but I think Hollywood Brown, being drafted slightly behind Ridley, has the opportunity to take a second-year jump similar to what Chris Godwin took last year. So my take is if Hollywood can stay healthy this season and sees an uptick in targets to around 120, 110, 115 even, he will easily outperform his ADP and be a dominant flex option on a weekly basis. I think he has the talent. He needs the opportunity. He's playing with the MVP, and he can put it all together this season. And the sky is the limit for Hollywood. He could have a 1,500-yard, 15-touchdown season like Tyreek Hill, but he needs to see the opportunity to do so. And if Baltimore commits to that passing game and they start to switch over to a more passing-oriented offense, Hollywood will be the beneficiary of all of that. Not to mention that they let go of a guy in Hayden Hurst. They did not acquire any wide receivers, not really much of a pass-catching running back that will be seeing 70 catches on the year anywhere in their backfield. I just think Hollywood should be the clear target leader right behind Mark Andrews in targets for the year, if not ahead of him, and that will help him finish as a value at his current ADP and ultimately a great pick in fantasy this year. As always, make sure to like and subscribe and let me know down in the comment section, what do you think of Hollywood Brown in this year's drafts at his current ADP? Is he a value? Is he overrated? Is he a guy that you are targeting in any of your leagues? And I guess, what stat line would you project him for this upcoming season? I think I'm going to be starting to do a lot more player profiles. You guys seem to like them. I like to deep dive into players that can be great values in fantasy drafts. So stay tuned for a few more player profiles coming out as draft season approaches in mid-August. And as always, make sure to follow us on Instagram at gridiron_guys_YT.